Back in 2020, Universal tapped director Leigh Whannell, who had a history of success working with James Wan as well as making his own films, to direct their remake of the classic monster movie Invisible Man. And it went over pretty damn well. I definitely had my complaints back when I reviewed it, but I did like it overall. And it seems like I'm not the only one who appreciated what he did with that movie because it was a pretty big hit. So because of the success with that, Leigh was handed this film, and I gotta say, this one did not go over quite as well. Simplicity really is the name of the game with this film. It's one of the most straightforward mainstream horror films I've seen in quite a while. And in theory, that doesn't have to be a bad thing. Some of the greatest horror films have been just very simple concepts executed well, and they've used that to their advantage. But as we'll get into in a second, simplicity cuts both ways because if it's not executed well, it can end up leaving a film just feeling thin. To talk specifically about this movie, we'll start with the bad, which is the ending. I've legitimately come to believe that sticking the landing is the hardest part of storytelling. There are just so many great films that end up being downgraded to just being good due to messing up the third act. And while this movie never was great to begin with, it was pretty passable up until the ending. For starters, the third act here just is not all that exciting. Say what you will about the third act of Invisible Man, but that was at least action-packed and it went out with a bang. On the other hand, Wolfman, just on a thrills level, kind of goes out on a whimper. He must not have gotten his doggy treats, I guess. But much more importantly, the ending doesn't work because they really mess up the conclusions of the character arcs. The main conflict of the movie seems to be set up very clearly in the beginning, where basically Christopher Abbott's character is afraid of becoming like his very harsh military-style dad, and so he ends up going too far in the opposite direction where he's just too soft and his wife and daughter don't really respect him that much. And so you think, okay, so the conflict, his arc in this movie is going to be that he's going to have to discover this inner wolf man. He's going to have to discover this more raw, masculine, animalistic side of himself. And that's what the story is going to be. Julia Garner's character similarly has a very simple arc setup where basically she's this career woman who feels kind of disconnected from her daughter and disconnected from her more motherhood side. These aren't particularly fresh or original ideas, but if they were just executed well, I would have been satisfied. But they just aren't. Christopher Abbott's character arc in this movie is a real head scratcher. Just by the end, I'm left profoundly unsatisfied by what they do with this character. And Julia Garner's character is slightly more satisfying in the way that she wraps up, but honestly, not that much more. So after the tangle they leave these threads on, we get this final shot where we've got all this like emotional, swelling music playing, and I'm just like, what am I supposed to be feeling right now? I'm just conflicted. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel from this. Moving on to the mixed, I could honestly put over 2/3 of this movie in this category. I mean, this is basically the definition of It's fine, it holds my interest, but it just doesn't do much more than that. The car crash scene that's in all the trailers, I think, is a perfect summation of kind of how I feel about the whole movie, where basically it's fine, it's competently shot, and it's relatively stimulating while it's on, but when it's over, I'm just like, oh, that's it? Okay. Like I said in the opening, I also think the simplicity of it all is kind of a two-edged sword. Maybe if there was more going on plot-wise, it could have kind of masked some of these weaknesses, but because it's just so thin, there's nothing to hide the very obvious just holes in the character storytelling. As far as the good goes, there are some things to love. On the technical side, this movie is very well done. We frequently get these big, beautiful nature shots that are very lovely to look at, but even in the simpler moments, I just think the cinematography is really well done. Leigh Whannell is obviously a very competent filmmaker who really knows what he's doing and knows how to direct the camera. I also quite like the Wolfman prosthetics that they went with. It's not the most original thing concept-wise, but the effects do look great. The performances from the two lead actors are pretty solid as well. they do what they can with the unfortunate character writing that they're given. Ultimately, Wolfman is a very middle-of-the-road remake of an old classic. It's not bad, but it's not satisfying in the end either. In my opinion, it's a middle-of-the-road 5 out of 10.